Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Tony and I'm back building my little Hetzer. Not so little, but after a brief interlude where I just had to unbox that 1:6 scale snow speeder. So I hope you don't mind when I sort of just interrupted the build for that. If you watched that, I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't watched it, have a look at it. It's an incredible model. Now, anyway, back to the Hetzer. So in today's session, it's all about installing the sprockets, and I'm going to go and install the drive motors as well. And then we're going to start looking at building up the upper hull section. So I'm really looking forward to this part of the build. I've gone ahead and installed one of the sprockets. It's not fixed tight at the moment. I need to get the drive motor installed, so I've got some resistance, so when I tighten up this essential central locking bush here, it's got something to resist against. So I'll do the other side in real time. We'll install the motors in real time, and then we'll get cracking on the top hull section. Now, just you know, obviously these there's a lot of discussion on the Armortek forum about this particular part of the build on this Hetzer model, and a few of the builders there had some issues with the original aluminium sprocket rings, and because of their bringing that and flagging that to Armortek have brilliantly replaced those with steel metal rings, so it's improved it immensely. So big thanks to the builders out there that flagged it, and a massive thanks to Armortek for acknowledging that and replacing them relatively quickly with the steel sprocket rings. So massive thanks there. And so we're going to get cracking now. So I'm going to reposition the camera, and we'll get close in and we'll work through how I've gone around setting out the sprocket and installing the sprocket. Right, so we're ready to start, but the very first thing we're going to do is clean up all the metal parts that touch and engage with each other with some acetone. Acetone's a brilliant way of just making sure that any residual grease or anything that you've been working on your hands or whatever is removed without trace, because this is all about a friction fit with the locking bush. So we need to make sure there's nothing that's going to be on there that's going to affect how that locks and engages. So what I'll do now is just sort of go in and I'll get myself straight in a minute, but we'll go in and we'll just clean up the inside of the hub of this, and you can see there's some I mean, even though I've cleaned this, there's always something, especially when you've been handling them, you know, for painting and everything else. So that's that. And then I'm just going to wipe over, I'll do the inside of that first. We'll go in and do the inside of that. And that's what goes over the axle. And then we're just going to wipe the outside of that. Excuse me, classic, dropped it, no harm done. Just get that a good clean. This is what you need to make sure is clean, because this is what grabs the inside of the hub. And that should do it. And then I'm just going to, let me just wind that in a bit. And then give that a bit of a wipe over. So now what we'll do is we're just going to pass that into the hub, just like so. That's going to need a little bit of encouragement with a little rubber mallet. And then I'm going to pass this onto the drive case, like so, just very loosely. So don't worry about that. And now what I'll do is I'm just going to reposition the camera so you can I can show it being bolted onto the side of the main hull. Right, so now we're just going to, you can see, you know, it would be quite tricky to install this. I can see why. I mean, I guess other builders have done it before they put the wheels on, but because I'm going with the instructions that Armortek have laid out in the manual, and it kind of roughly goes there, but there is an adjustment to make sure that essentially you need to make sure that the central line of these wheels end up in the central part of this sprocket. And I've got packers and everything else that I'm going to use to show you how I do that. But for now, we're just going to get a couple of fixings into this. There's 4 fixings in total. 3 go through the main hull, and there's 1 that goes through the outer part, which is this hole here, which is a slightly different fixing. So what I'm going to do now is just sort of, it's awkward. This is awkward because obviously you've got the drive case, or the main motor mounts installed, so it's a little bit tricky. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, the old tricks of the trade, is going to put a little bit of blue tack on that, So I can actually grab, probably too much blue tack, put that on the end of that. I say blue tack, this is actually grey tack. And I'm just going to pop that in there because this is not magnetic. So that there holds that in place. This is the very bottom one, which is the awkward one. It's the one that's underneath the drive or the motor mount, if you like. And I'm going to put that and I'll present that through that hole, which is, there we go. You can see that just popped through, which is there. And I'm going to, because it's awkward, to try and get this first one in, I'm just going to rotate that round. Just try and get a couple of turns on that so it grabs it. There we go. That's that. Now I can move this around, keep it all nice and loose. I'll just pop that. Stay. You watch that drop now. Just get a couple of bits of thread locker on that. Just get the rest of the fixings. Now these are M5 10mm cap fixings, that, but don't tighten them up too much. You can do all the tightening up afterwards. Thread locker is essential on this part because the stress that this goes under is incredible. Just trying to find that. Just trying to find that hole. It will go in, he says. Just slacken that one off a bit more movable. That'll be. Right, let's start again. Sorry about that, but the wrong fixing in the wrong hole. Here we go, warts and all again, guys. So you're probably all screaming at the video there and go, what are you doing? And you're right. Anyway, so that's that there, and now they're going in without any problem whatsoever. And then I'll tighten all these up in a moment. Then you've got your little countersink or countersunk. Let's have use that. Yeah. And that goes through the outside part. And that, when I did my mock welding on the front, I was aware of that, so I've made sure I didn't cover the area where that screw's going to go. That's a little bit fiddly, but we'll get there. Oh. Always, when the camera goes on, it's always the same. It's just... There we go, it's in now. So I'm just going to wind that in. Try not to damage the paintwork. I mean, there's no point me showing you the bolts this side because, well, it's just no point. So we'll just get that in. I will tighten that up. That's in. Now I'll just go around and tighten up all of these. That's awkward to get to that one. We'll come back to that. So that's on. That's on. We'll go in with this. Super nervous about setting these up. because obviously, I mean, it's difficult to know until you get the track on and, you know, moving and then putting it on the stress, whether or not this tapered bush is going to work correctly, because just by doing it by hand it feels right, but it's only when you get out and do your first test run you'll know whether or not it's doing its job. So all I can say is do everything you can at this stage to try and mitigate any problems further down the line. So this is a bit that I would say that you should take your time on. Right, so that's the drive case on. Now what we've got to do is try and align this with the central wheels here, and then before we tighten up this central tapered bush lock here, we'll do that with some packers. So I'll probably reposition the camera so you can actually see down the gap here to see what I'm doing. Right, so now it's all about the alignment, and in the instructions it tells us that this back of the sprocket ring here must be 10mm off the face of the wider part of the drive case here. 10mm plus or minus 1 or 2mm it says. But what's really important is to make sure that you line this up with the wheels, and just by looking down the line, everything needs to be pretty much central of that sprocket. And I can see it's pretty good, although it does need a little bit of encouragement from the bottom. So I've got a couple of bits of wood here. I've got a 10mm packer, which I'm just going to pop in there. I'm only using this bit of wood to pack the packer up, hold it so I don't have to fiddle about with it. And then I've got a 10mm packer on the top here. And I can see that that needs, I think it probably needs another millimetre, so I'm going to slide that in there. These are 1mm packers now. These are just packers from when I do my building work, standard packers, and I'm looking down the line of that and it looks pretty good. Right, so now we can sort of wind this in a little bit by hand, just to get a little bit of tightness on it. I'm going to tap this in with rubber mallet. And that should be fine. Just looking down the line of that, and now we should be able to start. Just put a bit of tightening on this. Just get the torque wrench onto that. Ever so gently. That'll do for now. That'll do for now, because what we want to do is obviously when we get the motor installed, when we get the motors installed, this will give us a bit of resistance on this sprocket. So what I'll do now is we'll go ahead and we'll put the drive motors in, and then we can tighten the whole thing up, and then hopefully get all these lined up. And I'm happy with the alignment, but everything lined up, and then we can forget about that and we can get on with the top hull section. Right, so we're about ready to put the motors on, or install the motors, and I'm really happy with the way the sprockets are aligned, but I will not be able to tighten them up anymore until I've got the motors on to give them some resistance, so when I put my torque wrench on it I can get a bit of grip on it. So that's that. But before I do that, I wanted just to show you, hopefully you can pick this up in the camera, but this is the little bit of track that I built previously just to test the alignment of the sprocket, and it works perfectly. And I just wanted to demonstrate to you that, put it on the right way round, the split pins always go on the outside. I want to demonstrate to you that this track doesn't bind with the inside face of this drive case, or the outside face of this drive case. It clears it by about probably 2.5 millimeters. So I think that's why it's really important that you get the alignment of the sprocket perfect, so that when you start driving this tank, that this doesn't the track doesn't hit the drive case and possibly derail it. So that's that, and we can just see that all of this all lines up really well. So that's that. Put that away for now. Now, so let's talk about putting these motors in. One thing I hadn't realised, and I don't see how you would realise it unless you've bought the motion pack ahead or at the same time you bought the tank. I bought the sort of main drive motor pack with this tank, is that when you install the motors, you have to, as well as some brackets that fit either side here, you have to bolt them onto this sort of inside sort of drive mount here. The problem is you can get to 3 of the fixings, but you cannot get to the one underneath. Now in the instructions from Armortek, it says, note that CU0102, which is basically this panel here, or indeed this, will have to be removed to mount the drive motor. Well, you've gone ahead and you've installed all the wheels, you've installed all the suspension, you've installed the sprockets ahead, in line with the instructions, and then you're told to take it all apart to get the motors on. Well, I'm not going to do that. I think that with 3 fixings, the 2 side fixings and the top fixings and the brackets that you have here, it's going to be strong enough. I'm not going to go to the trouble of taking the whole thing apart to do that. But mistake I made was, I guess what I should have done is I should have read through the option pack instructions as well as the build instructions. So if you are going to build one of these Hetzers, buy one of these Hetzers and build one, be mindful of that as you start, or you set off on your build, that at some point the motors will need to be installed, and you may want to consider installing the motors ahead of doing all of the other work. But I'm fairly confident that with the way this is assembled, that we could probably get away with, most likely get away with the 3 fixings in here, as long as we get a good fixing on them, and then the brackets. So that's how I'm going to proceed. So the very first thing I've done is I've already gone ahead and I've greased up the gear mechanism, which basically will sit. So if I pop that in there, I just want to just test fit it for now. That just goes in there and it will hopefully find, there we go, and it locks it now. It's locked that wheel in place, so that's fine. Right, so we have a bracket. We have 2 different types of brackets. We have like a 2-part L bracket, if you like, to go in on this side, and then we have another bracket which is 2 parts like so to go in on this side. So obviously this is going to be tricky as well, because you can't really get your hands behind it, but I think we can probably get away with this, and I'll show you how I'm going to go about doing it. So this fits on the bottom here, so obviously I've got it elevated, so I'll just pull this forward a tad, so I can get underneath and fix these. That's no problem at all. But obviously when it comes to doing this part, this bit sits on the outside of that and bolts through here with 2 nut and bolts here. You're not going to be able to get the other side of this, so I'm just going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to line these up so they're fairly central for now, and I'm just going to get a bit of electrical tape and just put that around the top section. So now I've got this held together temporarily, so I've got the slot here so I can get 1 fixing in, and then now I can just double check to see if this is the right type of height. So just hang on. So I'll just try and get that locked in and engaged, and that's it. So now we can see if we need to drop that down. That looks about right. Yeah, it looks about right. So I'll be able to get fixings, I'll be able to prefix this together, and then I can get the fixings in the bottom, and then ultimately the main securing bolt at the top here. So let's just do that. So I'll pop that away for now. So I've got these put together temporarily. So the bolt goes in from the back. In this case we're going to have a washer, and we're going to put a nut on the end of that. what I can do is I can take this tape off now. Line that up and pop another bolt through with the washer and the nut. With the washer, I don't think you're going to need thread locker on it. What we do is just get that so it's just about central. To the right socket, and that is holding that tight. Might want to put something on the end of that. Let's have a look. I've got the right socket ready. No, still will do. Yep. Just using opposing tools, just tightening that up. It's always awkward on the camera because obviously I'm trying to do this so you can see what I'm doing, but at the same time I just sort of end up looking fingers and thumbs. So that's that sits on there. So I think we can probably we can probably fix that through to the on the side now. Just have to find. In fact, what I'm going to do with this is I am actually going to put a bit of thread locker on this. Corresponding nut. Now hopefully I can just hold that in place and tighten it in a minute. These are little countersunk fixings that go in underneath. Obviously I know we've painted it, but what can you do? I won't be turning the tank upside down intentionally. And so what I'll do is I'll just position that drive motor in again. Just make sure we've got, we're happy with that setup. And that's dead center. That's fine. Just going to tighten those up. I'm just going to hold underneath. That tightens that up. That's nice and tight. So that's that. Now we have the challenge of installing this drive with these. I mean, there's a fixing at the back here, but we've got fixings to go through the back of this, as I previously explained. There's just no way you could ever get a handle on this underneath. I've tried. Before I started filming this, I thought I'd have a go at doing it and failed miserably. So I'm just going to put some thread locker on these. I'm putting them through now because, so you try and do this while holding the motor in position. I'll try and this is doing this for the very first time, guys, so please forgive me. So just trying to find that locked in. Just try and wind these in a little bit. That one's in. You have to use a little spanner to tighten these up. So I've got the right size spanner here. I mean, how could you ever get to the underside of this without taking the side off? But you know, really don't want to be doing that. This is going to take a bit of time. Right, so I can assure you my swear box is absolutely full. I ended up having to remove the drive case along with the sprocket in the end because I couldn't get a level fixing with this motor onto the drive mount. It was a real pain. So I had to take the drive case off and the sprocket and then get the hot air gun out to sort of soften the thread locker on the drive mount here, which is bolted through the side of the hull, and then reassemble it all, put it all back together. And it was, you know, it's straightforward enough, but just annoying. Not Armortek's fault, my fault. I should have opened up the option pack and the motor pack ahead of doing all of the work on the tank here, and then I would have realized I would have probably decided then to install the motors a lot sooner than I have. That is what it is. So I'm going to have to do exactly the same on this side. The only thing is, I guess I just don't, you don't have to take all of this off, although it does say this has to be removed. I'm actually just, I've done it by taking off the drive case, just unbolting it from the back, which is what we did earlier on, and then giving me access to the fixings to be able to get the drive mount off. Then I bolt the drive mount onto the motor, then I put the motor in, offer it all back together, and then fix it all on. It's, you know, it's a bit of a frustrating thing, but I'll do it because I want to make sure that these drive motors are secured correctly. So a lot of wasted time, but you know, if you are going to buy one of these kits, just be mindful of that when you get to the point where you're putting this drive mount on. If you make sure you've got the motors ahead of doing that, because you could end up being in the situation where I am and having to take it all apart. So I'm going to crack on. I'll probably do this off a camera because you won't want to hear all the colourful language I'm going to be using while I'm doing it. So I'll come back shortly once I've done this. And we'll crack on, and what we'll do is we'll then get the torque wrench onto this and get this tightened up as it should do. I've done this side now, it's fully locked into position, and it's at its right tightness, and I'm happy with all of that. So we'll do that on this side just as soon as I've rectified this problem. So I thought I'd actually film the process of removal for you, but I'll get Ben to speed it up, but you should be able to get the gist of what I'm doing. Very first thing we need to do is to plug in the hot air gun. I've got a narrow nozzle on it to direct the heat directly onto the fixings, and then hopefully soften up the thread locker enough for me to undo the fixings without damaging them. So I'm going to turn this on now. A bit noisy. We'll get the first couple of fixings out, and then I'll ask Ben to speed up the whole process, because this is going to be frustrating. But hopefully goes a little bit easier than the other side. Getting them nice and hot. Probably about 10 millimeters away from the fixing itself. Always put that away on something that's not flammable, because that is hot. So we're just going to see if we can get this. There you go, that starts to move. Obviously don't touch this fixing because it's going to be hot. That's the first one released. Now we've got, going to do the next one. It's the only technique that I know of that can soften up the thread locker enough for you to remove the fixings. Hopefully now, let's have a look, see if this will, yeah, that's nice. It really works well, that hot air gun. Okay, just remove the next one because that's still piping hot. So that's that fixing. It's still warm actually. That's that one out. Now we need to get to the bottom one, which is the most awkward. Yeah, and the heat's got to that as well, so that's coming out really relatively easy. So I'll spend to speed the entire process up, and hopefully we'll get through this and be able to carry on with the build. Right, that was actually quite straightforward, but you saw, sorry, what I had to do there. Just use the hot air gun, slacken all the fixings off, or soften up all the thread locker, slacken all the fixings off, take them off. Just be mindful. I mean, all I'd say is, like I said before, it's my mistake. I should have been aware of this before I went ahead and did all this, but anyway, it's all done now. Hopefully that's going to save you a lot of time if you're going to build one of these Hetzers. So the only thing left to do now is these brackets, the shorter of which fixes onto the deck. Just going to put these together loosely, and then we can hopefully move on to some of the body stuff. These require washers. I'm not putting any thread locker on these because hopefully the washer will do its job. So just put these in very loosely for now. And that was actually one of the most frustrating parts of the build. I think the first side was the worst bit because it's the realization that you have to do that, and I mean once you've got over the realization that you have to do something like that, it's not too bad. And if you work out, as I said, the first side was the worst one because it was like, you know, really. But you know, once it was done, I knew how to rectify it, so you know, no harm done. That probably took about 35-40 minutes, maybe, you know, maybe 35 minutes. Obviously Ben's hopefully sped the whole thing up, and this side wasn't too bad at all. So I'm just going to put this on, and then we'll tighten up this central tapered lock, and then we'll get on to the rest of the build. So apologies for that, but hopefully, you know, as I said before, I like to try and show the real build, so to speak, so that you see it in all its good and bad. And also, as I said, if you are going to be building one of these, which, you know what, if you are contemplating on going down the route of getting one of these amazing tanks from Armortek, the Hetzer is a lovely kit. And it wouldn't be a difficult one to start with, but you know, I think it's one of the least expensive ones on their site. So, but anyway, if you do decide to go down the route and get one of these, hopefully this video is going to help you with dealing with some of the problems potentially ahead of anything else happening. Right, so I just need one more nut, I think. Yeah, so it needs to be offered up underneath. That's it. This is going to be a bit awkward. What I'm going to do is I'll probably just spin this around. Hopefully you can still see what I'm doing. Let me just move that. I think you can. Magnet. Awkward, but they I've got it elevated so I can get to the fixing underneath. Help if I use the right tool. There we go. Should be just hand tighten that on. Just a little spanner just to. I'm just holding it underneath. I'm guessing these need to be quite tight to help support the motor. And that's that. And then last, but not least, just need to get another washer. Making sure this is the right bolt. I think it is. Yeah. Right, so I need an M5 washer. I'll go and get that. So that's the M5 washer. Didn't have enough in my kit, but unfortunately I've got a box of washers. Socket. There we go. And that is it. So now what we need to do is just tighten up this central taper lock, and I'm just going to get my torque wrench on there. I'll set it to the right as they've described in the instructions. It's 20 pounds of pressure, I think. Just keep an eye on that because it is starting to drift. So let's get my packers out. Just undo that. This is quite an important part, so we got to make sure that we get this in the right position, at the right tension. Need a bit more wood. That's it. Need that to be lined up perfectly in line with the wheels. Just going to give that a bit of a tap. . 'Cause And that's it. Now, we'll soon know if this is in the right position, if this fits in there perfectly, and it does. So that is it. Now obviously this has got to be driven, and it's got to be put through its paces, so inevitably this may need to be tightened up again, or certainly kept a close eye on after it's done its first test run. So the first thing we'll do is, once we've got power to it, I'll test the motors on the bench, then we'll check this, then we'll take it out for a bit of a drive. I mean, we're talking about, you know, a long way off here because we've got a long way to go, but we'll take it out for its first drive, and then we'll see how that reacts, and then we'll leave the hubcaps off so that we can just check the tension on this here. So, but that feels right and it looks right. It's in line down here, and we'll just put a bit of track on that just to see, and it clears the drive case again, but only by a couple of mil, but it does clear the drive case, so I've got no concerns over that, which is brilliant. That's why it's a really good idea to, you know, to make up a piece of track when you're doing this. Right, so thankfully that bit is done. I'm sorry, it seemed to take forever. So we'll go on now and we'll start looking at building up the top hull section as my very next step in this build. Right, so we're going to go on now and I'll start assembling the top hull section. I've loosely put this side in already just with a couple of fixings. I've elevated the tank so I can get a better access to it. And I don't remember, but you picked up in the previous painting video, I painted the underside of this mudguard because obviously when it's installed, it's really going to be difficult to get a good hit of paint underneath it. I will have to pick up the fixings, but I can spot spray those, so that's not a problem. So we'll get cracking, and these are fixed from the back. So these fit, the lugs, if you like, go on the inside of the tank and fix through from here with a nut on the outside. And as always, these things are fairly awkward. I'll put the first one in, it's fairly loose. I'm just holding that there. I'll come in from the tank side and just pick that up. So I'm going to put these in. I won't tighten them up yet because I've got to put some thread locker on them, but I just wanted to get them. What I'll do is I'll spin that off a little bit. I'd already put thread locker on the other one, so apologies for that. But anyway, we'll carry on. I just want it to be fairly loose as we go along, putting in the fixings, because yeah, that's it. Let's hold that. Awkward again. Slacken that off. Just don't want it too tight, because you want to have a little bit of play in it while you're doing this. And just holding the nut in place with my finger and hopefully picking that up, which I have, which is that. And we'll go along and do the same. I'll do this one, I'll do the other side off camera because you'll find it a little bit tedious, but and we'll go on and do the front. Now I'm looking at the front glacier plate and I'm thinking, do I start installing parts of the gun? Because lessons learned with the motors, am I going to be able to get to it at that stage? And I don't know, so I'm going to read the instructions. I'm going to have a good look at the instructions and then decide how to do that and whether at what stage to do that. So I just don't want to get into what I've just experienced with the that's odd, didn't thread on that, with the sprocket and the drive case and everything else. So I will have a good look at that before I get started. let's pick that up. Once it's installed, we'll go along and I'll tighten everything up. Obviously I had a week off tank building because I wanted to unbox that amazing snow speeder. I don't know if you guys watched that. If you did and you enjoyed it, let me know. I think it's, I just had to do it. It was one of those things that when I saw it, I just fell in love with it. As a model enthusiast anyway, and then as a Star Wars fan, and then being as I'm absolutely bonkers about 1:6 scale. So that's all 7 fixings in. I'll go and tighten these all up now, and we'll go on and do the other side. I was going to do this off camera, but I'll film it just in case you do find it interesting. Again, same deal as last time, painted side down, of course. Lugs go on the inside of this, and the fixings go in from the back of the tank through the lug, and just holding that in place. Keep it a little bit loose until they're all in. Just going back to the glacier plate, I think I'm definitely made up my mind. I'm going to start putting some of the elements of that on it before I install the plate to the tank, because just looking at the instructions, I don't know how. Well, what I'll do is get this on. I'll just put it in place as a temporary and show you what you're left with to work with. Again, I may change my mind as I do all the time. I don't think there's a science to the sequence of building these. I think it's just however you feel comfortable with. I really like the look of this, and I really like the way it's coming together. And as I said in a previous video, it's weird the way these inanimate things creep up on you and you become really attached to them. My little grandson's already put his name to this one. That's 3 he's got now. Well, actually 2. He doesn't like the tiger. It's too noisy, he says. But yeah, I'm really attached to this, and as it starts to take shape, I can really start to appreciate the design. I wouldn't have wanted to operate one of these for real, because the space inside was hugely limited and extremely difficult to get out if you were under attack. So not a pleasant environment to be in, but as a kit, fantastic. And again, Armortek just excel in just bringing these things to life in scale. I've also got a couple of little upgrades from armor packs. One was the jack block and the little light that goes on the front, just a little bit more detail than the one you get with Armortek, so I just fancied doing it. So obviously talking about that because we're looking at getting onto the glacier plate, which I'll show you in a minute. I'm just pointing at it, but you can't see it, but it's there. Great big heavy piece of heavy armor, and that's what they did. They designed this with really heavy armor on the front, and lighter armor on the sides, because of the nature of the method it was used for doing its job. Oh, that is awkward. This is one of these ones. I'm going to turn the camera off. Turn the camera off so I can get a good feel to that. Rotate it round a bit. Actually, I'll probably do that now. But I'm just turning this round, but you won't see it. It's only awkward because the sprocket ring is there. I think I've got that now. Yes. Now we can go around and tighten all these up. You can see that still. That's tight. Nice and tight. The nut is binding on the end of the other end, which is good. Super tight. And when we talk about space, you can see it's really restricted to the kind of space we've got in here, and I believe the batteries are smaller batteries as well because of that very reason. So that's it. That's that done. So I'll have a little bit of a think, and we'll come back and we'll start installing this bad boy here. But just so that you can see, it's your side yet. This sort of sits sort of in there, and you can imagine you've got to get, and then you've got side pieces that are built up here. So when it comes to fixing the elements of the gun to here, it's going to be really, really awkward to get to. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I'll assemble all the parts, or all the awkward parts that have to be fixed from the back onto this now, and even go ahead possibly and put the slew mechanism in for the gun as well. So I'm going to have a little bit of think, and then I'll be right back. Well, I've decided to leave it for today. You know what? Sometimes you just got to accept that things haven't gone brilliantly. But you know, that aside, just time has just caught up with me. But that aside, you know, when I recap, we've installed the drive cases, we've installed the sprockets, we set our sprockets out, we tightened them up, and then we had to take them all off again to install the motors. But you saw how I dealt with that. You know, these things can be frustrating, but you know, it's part of the build, and be patient. And you know, just accept sometimes that mistakes happen, and there is always a way back. So you know, I'm pleased we've got that far. It's done. And you know, we went on and did a little bit of work on I started doing the top section here with the mud guards. So in the next session, it will be about completing or starting the completion of this next stage of the hull, the assembly of the hull. But I want to spend a bit of time looking at the glacier plate and the gun and the slew mechanism, because I may decide to install that at this stage ahead of me installing the plate onto the tank, because I'm just concerned that by the time the sides are up and everything else, it's going to be really awkward to work in and around the back of the glacier plate. So I am going to spend a bit of time researching that and looking at that and wondering what I'm going to do next. And I'll probably change my mind several times on the way. But by the time I see you again, I would have made my mind up and we'd have a plan and we'll get cracking. So thanks for joining me. I really appreciate all your support, all your comments. It's amazing. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe, because we have a long way to go on this particular build. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. I'm Tony, and as you know, I love building these amazing kits, and I'll see you soon.